One great exercise for young listeners is to sit in an environment and try to count how many different layers or different sources of sound you can hear. And a lot of times, inside there's, maybe five or seven, and you have to listen really carefully. So, one thing that humans are really good at is tuning out noise. And as you tune into your environment, you'll realize that you're tuning out a lot of that noise. So sometimes, if you're young, which I assume all of you are, you still have really good hearing, which means you can hear the electricity flowing through certain devices and stuff like that. And those are all layers. So I'm going to share a few different soundscapes for you to listen to. These ones are all very contrasting sound environments. The first one we're going to listen to is a little bit of the Amazon rainforest, and this is from a trip I took a number of years ago. It was me and my wife. We had two guides, and it was the four of us out in the middle of the Amazon rainforest. And so you can listen to this. This is from the Pacaya Samiria Reserve. All right, the second soundscape that I'm going to share is one I just recorded in Ann Arbor. And this is something that you can go out and listen for in your environment. These are a bunch of trumpeter swans that have decided that they're going to hang out here for a couple days. They don't spend all of the year here, but in the winter they're here. And I encourage you to see what instruments or what style of music this might make you think of. All right, and the third I'm gonna share. I guess I should share the crows, the thousands of crows. This is like what it feels like on social media to me, which is just like all of these like things chattering away. Um, and so yeah, so there's a couple thousand crows outside of where I live, and they have different sounds, but collectively they make this crazy sound. And right before sunset, they all come to, I don't know, gossip or share the news or do something. We don't really know what they're doing. No. the reason I find it really interesting in the natural world is that nature has found a way of sort of partitioning itself off into different sound frequency ranges. And so when I would travel, one of the places I traveled where I first really got interested in soundscapes was Costa Rica. And I had been outside and I took some photos, and the photos were nice, but it didn't quite capture what it felt like to be there. And when I was there, I'd hear maybe 10 or 15 layers, lots of different animals making sounds at night. And that was really interesting to me. And that was very much what made Costa Rica, the place I was in Costa Rica, that place. So each soundscape is sort of unique to a place. You don't have to be anywhere in specific. You can go to each place, and it's just a different way to think about what makes where you live or where you are unique.
So you just started telling us a little bit about how these layers or soundscapes start to work their way into music. Can you tell us a little bit more about how they relate to music?
Yeah, so when you listen to a piece of music, you might be paying attention to like one thing. You might be paying attention to the melody, which is if there's a singer, it would be the part that the singer has words for. That would be, a good way of telling what the melody is. But there's all this other information supporting the melody. There's the layer that is sort of most prominent would be the melody. The foreground is how I would describe it. The midground might be, if we're taking this idea of a song, it might be sort of the guitar or the piano that plays the interesting stuff behind it, or a synthesizer. I know, or anything electronic if you're listening to sort of pop music. And then the background, that third layer would be the things that happen that you're not so tuned into in terms of listening, that are still really part of the whole performance. So when I'm thinking about layers, I'm thinking, what's the thing I want people to focus on? What's the thing that supports that melody or idea I want people to focus on? And what's the next layer back, which sort of supports the mid layer? So that's, when you're thinking about layers, that's sort of how I'm thinking in music.
Wow, I'm definitely thinking a lot of different things about music right now as we're talking about this. So, to you, as a composer, while you're working with these layers and soundscapes and all of these things, what to you is probably the most interesting part of putting this all together?
Well, from my perspective, it's that we listen in different ways in different places. And so when you go to a concert or a concert hall, or if we're sharing a video, hopefully you're engaged and you're like, I'm supposed to listen. And certainly at a concert hall, you go in with the intent of paying attention. When we go outside, we sort of turn that part of our brain off. And so it's been a really interesting experience for me as someone interested in these soundscapes to try and maintain active listening even in environments where it's, not encouraged or as common. And a lot of times you find really interesting things. We have some great horned owls that nest outside of our where we live, and we first discovered them just because of the sound. We're like, that's a really interesting sound. What is that? And we walked, and there's great horned owls, and there were their babies up in the tree. So you can discover some interesting things out in the wild, or relations to interesting things. And it's also, that we talk a lot about music, but there's some scientific research as well that shows that if you have a quieter environment, it's a healthier environment to be in. And you talk about listening in layers. If someone's distracted in class, something else is grabbing their attention. That's very common.
Oh, this is also interesting, and it makes me want to go outdoors and just listen. Is there anything else you want to tell us today about being a composer?
Yeah, I mean, so one thing that I'm really glad that we're having we can talk with your students is that when I was growing up, didn't know that composers existed. Even though I was writing music, I didn't know A, that composers existed, B, that you could get paid to write music or have a job doing it. and see that I could do it. And so I hope that, if you're watching this and you have an interest, even if it's a minor interest, that you sort of explore and see where that goes. You have an interesting perspective. Being younger than everyone else, you're experiencing the world in a different way. And so it's really important that you say what you think is important. And what you think is important is very different than what Mozart thought was important, is very different than what Beethoven thought was important, and it's different than what I think is important. And we need, other voices. We need your voice in music. So that's something I want to listen to. Something else I should say too is it's really fun to be a composer. I do a lot of different things. I do, I write. I'm with the Lansing Symphony. I write pieces for people that ask me to write pieces. I teach a little bit, and so in terms of like how you make a living, you get to have lots of different interests that sort of combine into your career, and it's really fun.
It sounds a little bit like a puzzle that you can kind
Yeah,
of piece together with all the different ways that you can be a composer and bring music to people. That's so neat.
it's a very good way of putting it. So something I forgot to mention is that at the very beginning you asked me what a composer does, and one of the things that I was thinking about is that I tell stories through sound. And one of the pieces I want to share is something that relates to the era we're in, the COVID era, where we're sort of sheltering in place. It's unintentional, but about a decade ago, I wrote a piece called Rapture. And it's about these people that go in, they're looking for the deepest point in the deepest caves on Earth. And at some point along the way, they just get this feeling like, we need to get out of here. It's overwhelming. They're just like, they need to break free of this confinement. And the problem for these cavers is that they're days, sometimes weeks from the surface. There's no way for them to get out. So that feeling that they have to just like live through it, and then sort of hopefully have this, release of emotion, basically. And so I'm going to share a little bit of Rapture that goes with that storyline.